Hello and welcome to Boosting Your Virtual Executive Presence from 3D Executive Communications. I'm Allison Rosen. I'm a communications coach and a content specialist with 3D Executive Communications, and I've got more than 25 years of public relations and public affairs experience. Before 3D, I ran the Washington office for a global public relations agency that focused on healthcare. And prior to that, I was a federal and state agency public affairs specialist working in government in Washington, D.C.
And I'm Penny Daniels. I am one of the founders of 3D Communications, which is the parent company of 3D Executive Communications. I've been in communications for more than 30 years. And like Allison, I'm a communications coach and content specialist, which basically means that we write a lot of speeches and we write a lot of presentations. And I used to be a national and local television news anchor and reporter in markets like Miami and Chicago and New York and Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and it's these backgrounds along with our current work with clients who are conducting important and high-stakes communications with all kinds of stakeholders in the public and the private sectors that has given us really a front row seat on the challenges that so many executives are facing as they attempt to conduct business as usual in the midst of a global pandemic. And so whether this virtual is the new normal or the normal for now, what we have seen is that virtually overnight, COVID-19 has changed everything. In fact, Penny and I talk I would say every day about how all of the challenges that she and I and our clients are facing in personal lives and in our professional lives to just keep up the pace. And we were so, how much everything has just disrupted and how fast it came. Nobody knew it was even going to take place. And then one day, I think Penny was searching online and she found this cartoon that really captures the sentiment. And here's this team sort of innocently in their conference room, and they're talking about how far away digital transformation is going to be. It's not going to happen anytime soon. And in comes COVID-19 like a wrecking ball.
Absolutely.
And what that has meant is that every type of communication opportunity that we're now having while we're working from home is remote. That means if we're participating in internal meetings, or we're delivering presentations at a conference, or we're giving or we're holding interviews, or even if we're organizing big, really important external stakeholder meetings, they're all remote. Penny, you just had one of these meetings, or you just organized one of these meetings for, I don't know, you had like 50 or 60 people on the line and like 10 speakers.
Yeah, we had, well, as you well know, Allison, we do big FDA advisory committee meetings for pharmaceutical and biologics and device companies, helping them get their drugs, devices, and their biologic products approved. And so we do a lot of mock meetings. So recently I've been involved in 2 of them. And the first one, we had 10 mock panelists who all wanted to talk, a lot. They're esteemed, knowledgeable people. They had a lot to say. And the next one, we thought, oh, well, we better cut it down. So we had 7. And that was probably a little too many as well. It was really hard to make sure that everybody got a chance to speak. So that's one of the challenges we're going to talk about today. Being remote does add multiple complexities to already existing challenges. One thing, that technology can be really complex. Not everybody is so used to working with technology. We've been doing it for a while, but not all companies are. It's very easy for your audience to multitask, to do something else. So one of the things you can do is ask them to turn on their cameras, and that can help. It's also harder to read your audience, even when they do have their cameras on, harder to engage them than it would be in person. And it's really challenging to know how loud to be, how soft to be, how to, whether to use your hands. Everything about voice tone and body language is just much more challenging because we're not used to doing it online.
Yeah. And bottom line for all of that, Penn, is that it's just a lot more difficult for all of us who are used to being in charge, but to exhibit executive presence in this virtual environment. And let's talk about that for a second, because executive presence, it's important to understand that it's a set of learned behaviors that help enable you to command attention. This is really important because it's a teachable skill. It's a coachable skill. It's not something that's just innate and you either have it or you don't. So at its core, which is really important because it's really coachable and we can work on it, but we have to understand, these challenges of the virtual environment, adding complexities, as Penny just mentioned. And what it largely requires is the balance of these two concepts, strength and warmth, which can definitely seem like they're in contrast or in tension with one another. But when it comes to executive presence, they both have to be in balance. Because when you're communicating as a leader, you communicate strength because that demonstrates your capability to make things happen. But you also need to demonstrate and communicate warmth because that communicates to others that you share their intentions and their values. And so when we think about all of this, we think about communications and executive presence in this virtual reality. That is where we sort of landed on for today, the idea of how your virtual executive communications presence really requires additional planning, preparation, and practice. And so these are the topics that we're going to be talking about today and giving you some tips that we've learned the hard way along the way in the last 2 months, but over the years, because a lot of the concepts that ring true in the real world environment when we still meet person to person are actually hold true in the virtual environment as well.
Thanks for watching the first video in our series on boosting your virtual executive presence. Next up in the series, a virtual logistics check to make sure the logistics are working for, not against you. See you then.